All right. Let me come back to you. Hi, it's Rithkin, and I'm here with Duke Skeggi Newcomb from Ontier and the West. He lived in the West for a bit too.
Yay!
Yay! And this is part of my 50 Duke interview. And I've known Skeggi for forever, since I was a newbie fighter. So this should be a fun interview because Skeg's fun. So we usually start these with sort of your origin story. So if you can start with how you found the SCA and where and why and when, that would be great.
Sure. So when I was 20 years old, I finally moved away from the Eastern Washington over to Seattle, and I didn't know anything about that big city. And so a friend of mine, Jay Mastrud, who was like old skateboarder, punk rocker buddy that I hung out with over here, lived over there in Kent. And so I got in touch with him just so I knew somebody in the city. Well, I knew that he was in the SCA. I didn't even know what it was called, and I didn't understand it. I used to ask him questions like, so when you beat somebody up and you win, do you get their stuff? You know? And so I was really ignorant about how it worked, and I was totally not into pain. I'm like, he's like, oh, we hit each other with these sticks, and I'm like, yep, it's not for me. So anyway, when I moved over there, I got in touch with him, and he tried for weeks to convince me to try it. And I just kept telling him no. And finally, one day, he promised not to hurt me. And so he put me in armor, and we went really light. And because I always loved swords and armor and stuff since I was a kid, but I didn't want to get smashed. And I wasn't very big at the time anyway. So anyway, he did that, and I liked it. And then we just got a little bit stronger every week. And then pretty soon I was full blown into it, make my own armor and kind of learning. So that's how I found it.
And who is he in the SCA?
He was the head of the household that I was originally in. He used to live over here. He was not a squire. He was independent. He was going to try to go that route. So he still lives over that way, but he hasn't participated in the SCA for 15, 20 years, I would think.
So how long did it take you to find like a practice with other people?
That week.
That week?
Yeah. So at the time we were fighting under the bridge in the University District, which was nice because it was tennis courts. So it was fenced off. Parking wasn't that great, but no matter what the weather was, we had a place to go. And it was really just kind of cool because it had always been there. And then of course I met tons of people there. You know, Duke Torgel, Duke Dak, Squire Davin Stronghand at the time, Duchess Anhrad, Squire Thorkel at the time. I mean, there was just so many people. And it was a huge practice with some serious caliber fighters.
And well, some of those people are really heavy hitters. How did you get over your fear of being like hurt?
So I think it was just the excitement of being in armor, and you know that it was weird because I was able to accept the kind of pain. And then I had several concussions because back then it was 16 gauge was the rule, and helmets were not what they are today. You know, we've learned a lot about it. So I think it was just the excitement of it kind of overshadowed the pain of it. But you're right. Yeah, there was some devastating hitters. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think the pain of, because that's how they used to teach too. You know, it wasn't like they didn't show you how to do a rap. They just beat you to a pulp until you figured it out. It's like, that hurts, so I'm going to block or do something different. But I actually had worse pain and worse injuries as I got better because the fighting got so much better. I started getting hit in spots we normally didn't armor. So
interesting. Yeah, like so back in the day, like that was the practice where all the kings came from, right?
Yeah, that was like well, you look at most of the people that have come from that practice have become dukes and duchesses and knights, and just it was brutal, but it was fun. The people, like we also went out to pizza every single Wednesday after fight practice, which once it moved, that went away. So that was a big thing that I thought was weird. It's just like the family and camaraderie. It was still there, but it was not the same as when it was under the bridge.
Yeah. I think when I started, like, we never went out after fighting ever, which is kind of sad. Yeah. Now that I think about it. So I know that you squired to Torgal. How did you hook up with him?
So I watched Torgal fight, and it was phenomenal. I've never seen anyone fight like him. And I loved the chainmail and the horse tail out of his helmet, just the look that he had. And everyone's like, that guy's title is the best fighter in the known world. I mean, back then, that's what everyone was telling me. And I'm like, man, I want to fight like that. I didn't understand the logistics of height and different things like that. But so I tried to emulate Torgal. I used to have like skirts because I didn't understand what a surcoat was. So I actually wore it was more of a skirt that was on a belt that kind of looked surcoatish. But then with him, Gordon at the time was selling spring chain. So I bought bags and bags of spring chain links. I made my own chainmail. I didn't know what a horsetail was. I just knew it was hair. And so I went and bought a black wig and cut a strip out and made a cap for it and sewed that on my helmet. And then the first time I wore it was at Alpine Pass War. And I'm standing next to Torgal, and I'm like, hey, Your Grace. And he looks down. He's like, hey, I had no idea who I was because I was wearing all different stuff. But he kind of noticed, is like, oh, this kid's wearing chainmail, and that's funny horsetail. But every time I would throw a blow, my sword would get wrapped in it, and you could hear the hairs go snappity, snap, snap, snap. And he cracked up all day. Every time I'd throw a blow, he'd just turn and he'd laugh. So I was going to ask him. So, well, that was Alpine Pass. So then I told him, hey, it's me. And at the time, my name was Brennan Norcross. And he's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And so I started fighting in practice for a while. And I was really wanting to figure out how to be a squire. And everyone's like, oh, you have to ask. You know, back then, you know, it was very rare, if not impossible. Knights didn't ask people to be their squires. It was very different. You had to have the courage to go and ask. And I went to an event, I think it was a May Crown, the No Shields Crown, back when Thorin was in, I think Onrod, I think it was Thorin and Onrod back then. We're king and queen, it was No Shields. And so I wanted to squire to Torgal, and I thought, this is it. So I got drunk as could be because I was terrified to go and ask him. So I went to his tent that night, and it took a bit to track him down because I didn't know anything about the North Slum at the time. And everyone pointed out his tent, so I went and knocked on it, and I said, is Torgal in there? And I hear, yeah. And then I said, I need to talk to you right now. And the flaps fly open, and there's Duke Dak towering over me with an axe. And I'm like, I think I just made a mistake. And then I hear Torgal inside the tent go, yeah, what do you want? I'm like, oh, I just need, no, I was a nervous wreck. I was like, I need to talk to you. And Dak was looking very suspicious and like he was going to tear me apart, like I was threatening or something. So he came out, and I asked him if I could be squire for the day. And that came out real easy. I'm like, I would like you to squire for me for the day in the crown tournament. He goes, sure, no problem. And then I went to ask, I'd like you to consider me as a future squire. And it came out as, eh. And he laughed and he's like, what? And I couldn't say it. I couldn't say the words. And so he said, I think he knew what I wanted to say. So he just said, let's see how you do tomorrow. And so that was my first crown. And I went to the semifinals with Gunnar and Darius, who were both knights at the time. And so I got my Squire's belt that day at the end of the tournament.
Did he do a ceremony?
No, he looked at me, and when I fought Darius in the semifinals, I actually backed him up because he had a giant pole axe and I had a spear and a sword, which I had never ever even touched before. I just was like, oh hell, I'll go with this. But I backed him into the corner and I poked at him, and I thought I got him, and his head turned into a silver rose, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get because I knew there was no way in hell I was beating Gunnar, because Gunnar was the man to beat. Back then it was just brutal. So the silver rose said and so I didn't know, this is how, it was my first crown. I didn't know enough about tournament that I thought I had to back up and let him out of the corner. And as soon as I got in his range, he dropped that axe on my head like a tent pole, just bam, on the ground. And so that was the end of my day. And I went up to Torgel. I was all proud of myself. And he's like, why didn't you hit him again? I'm like, what? He's like, why didn't you just hit him again when he didn't take your shot? Just hit him again. And I'm like, I didn't know I could do that. And he just threw my belt at me and goes, here, and walked away, because that was his way. So that was the greatest ceremony I could ever hope for.
That's hilarious. For people that don't know, in Ontier, the person that comes in second in crown is the Silver Rose. So Skeggi was seeing visions of the Silver Rose before the fight was finished, which is hilarious. But that is a really good result for your first crown. I mean, did you have any idea that you had done this thing?
I knew it was a kind of a big deal, and I'm pretty certain it's because it was a no shields crown. I mean, I took to fighting pretty naturally, but the fighters that I was up against, I actually fought Davin right before the semifinals, and he had actually wrapped me in the hip, and I said good, and he was like, no, that was flat. And I was trying not to bawl my head off because I was in so much pain that, now if I got that kind of pain, I would just take it. I'd say, well, it's flat, but you broke my hip.
Right.
So it had actually broken part of my pelvis.
Oh.
So I was in literal pain. My body was broke. I had to go to the hospital that week. And the doctor's like, yeah, you're broke. But because I think I was in shock, but Davin said he hit me several times in the head, and I didn't take anything. I was completely obliterous. And then I hit him with something, and he's like, yeah, good. He was a Squire at the time. So I'm like, maybe I should have only went to the fourth to last round, but I don't remember anything other than my hip was broke and I got my Squire's belt that day. And but I knew that was as far as I was going to go, because if I had to fight Gunnar, that it was going to be a short final.
Yeah, I think those of us who have fought Davin can relate to the fact that even when he hits flat, or he thinks it's not good, or his stick is mushy, that sometimes it's debilitating.
Yeah, and, you should just take it anyway.
Right. It wouldn't be surprising that your brain went, ooh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a cool squiring story. I have a similar one. I got my belt thrown at me too. So that's
the way. Cool. That's the way.
So how long were you Torgel's Squire?
Just less than 3 years, 2.5, 2 3/4 years.
Okay. And did you know at that time that you wanted to be a knight?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, my goal was bigger because I was always raised don't set little goals. Now that I'm older, I got all sorts of little goals. But when I was young, I was taught go for big goals and set a goal that you don't think you'll ever reach, because then you'll never quit trying. When they told me that Torgo was the best fighter in the known world, that was my goal. It was like, yeah, eventually I'll get knighted. Yeah, eventually I'm going to win a crown, but I want that. I can't imagine a bigger thing in the fighting world than everyone going, yeah, that guy's unbeatable. He's, and there at the time there was a few people that could beat him, but when you go to Penzic and you one shot 90% of your opponents in a big tournament, that was the story that I was told. It's pretty impressive, and I wanted to be that guy, and I still haven't reached that goal. So that one's pretty tough.
Like you hear those stories like the war god of Trimaris or whatever, and
sure. Just brutal thing. But
yeah, we'll see. We might actually interview him, so we'll see. That would be quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, if he'll interview, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So how did he teach you? Like, was it more of the martial part or the other part or all of it?
So earlier on, because the people that I was fighting, Torgal, Davin, and all these guys, I'm like, I don't think I'll ever be that good. I mean, I did good in my first crown because there was no shields.
Right.
If there was shields, I don't think I would have stood a chance. I would have went out in 3. But I thought, well, since I'm not going to be a knight, or I'm definitely not going to be a knight very soon, I should look at some other avenues. And so I had Torgal taught me silversmithing. He taught me how to etch, and we're building helmets and bracelets and torques and all these cool Norse jewelry stuff and pouches. So that was kind of my first thing, and I still do that. I still love it. I don't do it nearly as much, but he taught me how to silversmith, and that really taught me patience. And then other than that, it was just the martial training, heavy fighting, and it was not so much instruction as just you had to figure out how to block what he was doing. And as soon as you figured out that, he would change it up and hit you somewhere else.
It was a lot of learning by doing.
Yeah, it's definitely old school, which that was good, I think. And I don't know if that contributes to what we called the gods. That there was only a few of them. I mean, there was, let's say 10. These are the top 10 that, man, you are never going to beat these guys, versus the way we train now, where we teach our squires and stuff, these brutal things right off the get-go. And there's so many good fighters right now compared to, we knew exactly who the good fighters were. We knew pretty much, if this guy fights crown, he's probably going to win. If he fights in a tournament, they're going to win, depending on who was there. But now it's like, you really can't tell. It's like Hercules is a prime example. You never know who's going to win that. And that's the biggest tournament we got.
Yeah. I think Ontario is sort of unique that way, about how broad and deep our lists are. There's seriously like a dozen people that could win almost any time.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously there's favorites, but, it wouldn't be surprising. It's kind of a cool thing.
I think so.
Yeah. I actually have some pictures of your artwork. Do you want to talk about that now, or should we talk about fighting some more?
Oh, we can go back and forth, do whatever you want. This is your show.
All right. Let me share the screen just a sec. All right. Well, I'm going to start with these pictures. This is you and Thorin.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was a cool picture. It's sort of Varangian Gardish. Was this later though, right?
Yeah, that's much later. So I'm looking at those pants. Those are from 2005, so that was probably around 2011-ish.
Yeah, I think this must have been his last reign.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see.
And I remember it was a big deal. He wanted the Varangian Guard to kind of be back for that range.
This one's an old one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brother Barrick and Brother Mishka.
Yeah.
That's
like during Davin's reign.
Yeah, that's a little older right there.
So I put this in because I love your helmet, and it's a Torgal helm, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was my knighting gift in 1992.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is that a knighting gift? And
yeah.
Did he do that for all of his squires?
No, he didn't. Typically, he would do stuff just on a whim. Like this one, when I got knighted, he actually asked me what I wanted, and I just said, I want a helmet worthy of the gods. And so, he can do that. Right. So I still need, I don't know what happened to the piece. There's a centerpiece you can see with little holes on the forehead. There used to be a serpent there, and then there was actually a ridge, but the ridge just got destroyed, and I haven't ever put nothing back on it. And then that's about the third grill, because it used to have a double grill, and then I redid it that way.
And that's the helmet you still use, right?
Yeah. So that helmet's been around for, 18 years?
Yeah. So pretty. And that's just a different view of the same one.
Longer than that, 28 years. Yeah.
So let's see.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite picture of all time.
Really?
Yep. So that was my first reign. And I don't know if that was Thorfinn's first or second reign, but that's at Ontario West War. And he was asking me, he's like, man, everywhere you go, everyone's doing the wave. And I said, well, I don't want court to be long and boring. I want it to be fun and festive. And I want it to be about, court should be about the people there, not about the crown anyways. And so he was like, well, teach me how to do a wave, because it wasn't going so well for him down south. So that's us getting the crowd to do a wave. And the reason I love it so much is Thorfinn and I, we've been buddies since way back, like probably in my second year in the SCA, we met, and we've been super, super close friends ever since. And our paths kind of followed the same thing. Like, I don't know if we got knighted on the same year, but it seemed real close. And then, of course, we served our reigns together. And every time we get together, I think it's a personality thing. We just make people crack up nonstop.
Well, you definitely, we're kind of skipping around, but because we have these pictures, I think actually the next one is one of my favorite pictures. Yes.
Yeah.
You have this sense of fun and whimsy that you inject into really everything, but your reigns especially, even your fights. So I love this because, you have the picture in the corner there that's like old school Skeggi and Thorfinn, and then, this one.
One was when Thorfinn was my squire, and we've got our tents in the background, and we have several pictures, and we call them the Batman and Robin pictures. and I don't know why or how, but he is always wearing a cape every time. And this time, of course, when I won that crown, I was champion at the time, and their majesties had asked me, well, who do you think would be a good champion? And I said, honestly, the only person that terrified me today was Thorfinn. And they said that'd be a great choice. And so that's how he became champion. And when they called him up, he was pissed. He looked at me like, you bastard, how'd you do this to me? But
he's fierce.
He's one of the few fighters that actually just terrifies me. Just because I know if something gets through, you're going to remember it for 2 weeks.
So another picture of you as king.
Yeah, that was the Go Force.
And that's you as Prince of Ortha, which we're getting way out of order, but
oh, that's fine.
It sort of segues into your art, which I think might be the next picture.
Well,
that picture I just thought was super funny. So.
That's artistic. Yeah, and I can't remember why I was not at that 12th night, but I may have been out of state, but I remember there was a lot of photos of me going around. And
I couldn't help myself. I had to put it in, but I think the next picture is your art. There it is.
So, yeah. So those were the brooches. That was the first piece. I think that was the first piece I ever made. And so Torgal had an upside down raven on his nasal of his helmet, and I really liked it. And so, let me hang that up. I'm pretty sure my social security number has not been canceled.
So. No, I don't think that's a thing.
So anyway, that I created that and did a simple etching, and then Torgal showed me how to make the stamps, and I didn't know how to use them really well to make beautiful art, but I was just copper and brass. Started out flat and learned how to do the scrimshaw work and the stamp work, but that was like the first thing that I ever made.
Yeah, so that's the first thing you ever made. And then
oh, that old thing, you're gonna bring that up?
I think this is so beautiful.
Yeah, so that is Duchess Leviga's ducal cornet, and that is absolutely by far the favorite thing that I have ever built in my entire career. I built that, geez, that was back in the early 90s when she won that. So I actually made the stamp. I did all those bezels are individual riveted bezels, so they're actually punched through and riveted. So I had to do the bezels, all the silver work, etch the strawberries, cut them out. So everything there other than the trim, I built the hinges, everything. And she was a dear friend and has always treated me well. And I just absolutely adore her. So I made it for her as a gift. But when I gave it to her, the very front strawberry had a scratch in it. And it wasn't like huge, but when you're a laurel and someone hands you your ducal cornet, you notice those things. So she said, oh, I love it. I adore it. But it's got this little scratch. And I just took it from her. She was like, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to fix it. She was like, no, bring it back. I'm like, nope, it's not perfect. So I actually went and made a new strawberry, gave it back to her. And so it was perfect at the time. And I hung that strawberry in my shop. And it was on my wall until I became a Duke. And then I put it on the front of my cornet.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it was always a reminder, if there's a mistake, fix it. Don't send it out.
Yeah. So I have a question about this because I've always really admired it. Is the shape based on something? Because it's very unique.
She actually gave me a book and some printouts, and it was I can't remember if it was a Scythian diadem, and it was the first time I'd ever heard the word diadem, but the archway was very specific, and the picture that she gave me, the stones were just chaos instead of the symmetrical like what I did, but they were just total chaos. And I'm like, well, that doesn't appeal to me at all. So this is what I came up with. But she also wanted the archways removable. And so once she actually got the cornet, she pulled the archways off almost immediately and just wore it as a band with the strawberries on it. And I gave her an extra set of hinges. But then when Vivian got hers, and I did one in silver, I used the same stamp, everything on it. And I think she liked how it looked. So she's like, she wanted her arches back, and her arch was completely destroyed. So it's got a brand new arch. And then I did brand new hinge pins. And of course I have a little bit more skills now. So I put stones on the hinge pins and all that,
it's super cool.
Yeah, even that was the same original stamp that I used to build the original.
And then I'm going to go to these because these are your most recent, right?
Yep. Those are the Owerthen coronets.
And this was a project you did with Steer Car?
Yeah, I originally won the bid for that. And then Steer Car called me and asked if he could help. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. I'd love to have your help. Because he did the crenels on them and the rondelles, which is his artwork is demaskining.
Yeah, let me see.
which
We
is,
got a close up. There we go.
yeah. So that's all real silver and gold stamped into iron, and which he actually went to Spain to learn. And so there's a master there that he works. And then I put all the stones on, and then the off to the sides, those little flower things, the stars. Uh, Master Hugo actually showed me how to do that work. Those are all stamped out and repoussé. So
super cool. I love those because they're so unique looking with the colors. They're really beautiful.
yeah, I'm a fan of blue and silver, and then originally I blacked the silver and then knocked it with some steel wool, so they were actually much darker. And then the blue trim on there just really makes them just pop.
Yeah, they just pop. But anyway, let's go back to you. So, not just your art. So when you were knighted, was it a surprise?
Not a total surprise. So what I had done is anytime someone would get knighted, they were my new target. So you can feel free to talk to Sir Rolf and Sir Dagar, and because once those guys got knighted, every time there was a tournament, I made a beeline for those guys because they were the latest knight. And then pretty soon it's like, yeah, pull Skeggi over to the knight side. You know, every time the numbers didn't match up, like, yeah, pull him over here, because everyone's like, we don't want him to pick us for the first round. So so I fought. I was doing really good. I was doing good in all the tournaments. I was holding my own. I felt really good, felt really strong. And they just kept not doing it. And some of the knights would come to me and they were actually upset, mad. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's like, if you guys all treat me as a knight, you all treat me with respect, and you're my friends, I don't really care. It'll happen when it happens. And the day I got knighted, I wasn't going to be knighted. Some things happened. I learned this later, a few years later, some things happened. And so they went to council, and Torgal came into camp, and he says, sit against that tree stump. So I did, and he tied me to it. And he goes, you're on vigil for 2 hours. So
tied to a tree stump for your vigil.
Tied to a tree stump for 2 hours, and he says, you're getting knighted in 2 hours. So that was my vigil. That was it. And
so tell me about that. Did people come up to you and give you advice, or?
Well, they would come by, and there was no advice. It was just more like, yeah, drink.
Tied to a tree.
I think most of the attention was going to my wife at the time, Sunny, because she was kind of overwhelmed. And it was funny because everyone's like, it was a big deal. Like, they drag her off and they're like, oh, you got to get dressed up and all this. And the thing that sucks is the photos of my knighting, because it got dark. And so it was 35 millimeter film and 110 film. And so there's no good photography at all that I've ever seen in my knighting. It's all swishes and swirls and candle swirls and tiki torches, but you can't see faces. I mean, it's just a mess. That's my only bummer about my knighting, is there's no record, of anything. But it was exciting. I didn't really have much of a vigil, which, anytime I was in an event, I was a vigil. I was a partier. I never drank during the week, but oh my God, on the SCA weekends, I was a terror. I was absolutely.
That you could perform on the field so well after drinking so much is a testament to you.
Yeah, I don't understand it, but even my first reign, I was so sick the next day. I was going to pull my name off the list, and Duchess Ludviga, she goes, try some of this gingerbread. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm just too sick. She gave me this little tiny, like a mouse portion. And I literally nibbled on it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get sick. So I pass out. And I'd nibble on it. And, oh, God, I'm going to get sick and pass out. And then pretty soon went back. And I'm like, hey, can I have a whole slice of that? Because I started feeling better. she's like, well, of course. And so I ate that whole piece of gingerbread and then won my first crown. And I was hungover. I wasn't even gonna fight. So yeah, I don't know what it is.
So tell me about like how you were training while on your way to knighthood. Like how many practices were you hitting a week?
One practice a week on Wednesdays religiously. I never ever missed a practice in 3.5 years. Not one. And even when I was sick, if I fought with pneumonia before, I think I did actually miss 2 or 3 practices after that crown where Davin had hit me because I couldn't really walk. But when I was able to function, I never missed it. But I do not do pel work. I've probably done pel work maybe 8 times in my whole 32, 35 year career, whatever it is. It's just boring to me personally, because and I see how it can be effective. I've seen a lot of people use it effectively for targeting and stuff, but typically your targets aren't stationary, and I'm not fulfilled by it. So I was just, if I needed to fight, I would just call a buddy and say, hey, let's go do some rounds. But pretty much just Wednesday, and I would fight any tournament or any war within like 3 or 4 states. But back then, most of us didn't have a lot of money, so we would put a van full of people together. I would put 3 other fighters in my car, and we would drive. Of course, gas was cheap, but we would just go. We would go to Idaho. We would go to California. We would go to Oregon. I mean, if there was something going on, we were there. So I was typically fighting twice a week, but one of those times was always in a tournament or war. It should be easier now because there's so many dang events. Back then there was only 1 event a month, maybe 2 if it was crown month. But everybody was at the event because that was the event for the month, right? Where now you got all the principalities, so you got like 4 or 5 events a weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of a curse in a way because there's so much going on that you never get like critical mass at anything. So you're not getting the crucible that you did back in the day. You don't get all the heavy hitters at one event,
right?
Or even one practice now, because there's almost a practice. Well, when we're fighting,
right.
Practice every day of the week in the Western Washington. So,
right.
Yeah. Woe is me. Too many practices. Anyway, so did you ever have like a tourney day ritual or anything? I mean, you're pretty, famous for fighting hungover and doing well. And
yeah. So my first ritual was to open my eyes and think, am I going to throw up? So from the drinking the night before, but I can't remember how it got started, but I was in the processional and my stick was just absolute garbage and I needed a new stick. And so I think I bought a piece of rattan at the event, or I probably brought one with me and I was all liquored up and forgot that I needed a stick for the next day. So I was in the processional cutting down my fighting sword for the day. And everyone's like, oh, you're not ready. I'm like, and of course I couldn't say, no, I'm not ready because I'm irresponsible and all that kind of stuff, even though that was totally the truth. But I'm like, oh no, this is what I do. I made this stuff up on the fly. This is what I do to make sure I have a brand new stick so no one has an excuse, me or you. And so that became a thing where I actually finished every single sword that I fought with in the last 20 years was built in the processional. And I would cut them to length, but there would be rattan scraps all over the place. I had a draw knife and a file, and people are like, man, are you doing that again? I'm like, every time, every crown, brand new stick. So it was kind of a fun thing, but it happened totally by accident.
And did you do that through the second crown you won?
Yep. Just sit there and you'll know when I'm there because there'll be a pile of rattan along the way of the processional. I try to keep up my mess, but
nice. And you have a super defensive style. How did you create that or decide that that is how you wanted to fight?
So back when I was a Squire and I was fighting all those heavy hitters and I was getting all those concussions and mass bruises and blood pools under the skin, I decided I was tired of getting hurt. And so I consciously made the decision that I was going to learn to block everything and then work on the rest of it, because it seemed like every time I threw was when I was getting hurt. And I didn't understand timing. I didn't understand a lot of the stuff that these guys were doing to me. So I just decided I'm just gonna be defensive. And I almost didn't throw a blow for close to a year. And Torgo finally said, you know, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? And he says, you don't throw. I'm like, well, if there's something super stupid and super obvious, I'll go for it. But other than that, I'm tired of getting hurt. And so I'm going to learn to block and then I'll work on the rest. And he's like, okay, you know, that was his instruction. It was like, okay. So I did that. And then when I had decided that I wasn't getting hurt, I wasn't getting hit, and that I wanted to start to be more aggressive, it was almost impossible for me to be the aggressor. Like even today, I'm not in my comfort zone if I'm going to be the attacker, because and I don't know what it is, but I think it's being so defensive for so long that actually sunk my fighting. Like there's people, Steercar is a prime example because we don't actually fight that different. He's taller and lengthier, but he's got so much more game because he can actually be an aggressive fighter or a reclusive fighter, where I tend to just be that reclusive until I see something. And then it's hard for me to be the aggressive fighter.
Well, but I mean, you get to the point, like you defend, and you get to the point where you frustrate your opponent and they make a mistake and you capitalize on them, which is a really smart way to fight. It's really, energy conservation and it's just smart. Sure. So, I mean, you are aggressive when you decide to go and your opponent's frustrated.
Yeah, and you can see when that happens. You can see it in their body language, like a huff,
right?
Or just like you can see it in their eyes. When they feel defeated, you can usually see or sense that, or you just get in a position and like when someone, my classic is hitting people in the leg, and that's from my younger days when I was a bully. It was just fun to hit people in the leg because I knew how bad it hurt, and I wanted people to basically be afraid of me, because that's kind of what we did back in the day. It's like every time this person faces me, I want them to think, oh my God, this is going to hurt so bad. So I'd hit him in the leg and get them down, and as soon as they just kind of drop their shoulders, they're done. They're just like, oh God. And then that's that moment you can capitalize on it. But for me personally, it's just like, are my fights boring to watch? That was always a fear, because I hate watching boring fights. I cannot stand a boring fight. And so I want my fights to be exciting for the audience. Now, when I was younger, I didn't care. It was all about me. But as I got older and more mature, it was like, it's really important for the audience, because without them, none of this crap really matters. So I want them to be excited, and I want my opponents to also be excited, no matter who wins or loses. I want everybody to be happy with how things went, and it was fun to watch. Well, I did get to a point where when I finally decide to go, that it's usually pretty exciting, not for my opponent so much.
Well, you're a member of the Order of Defense too. Do you fight similarly with Rapier? Are you defensive?
I actually was way more aggressive because I already had speed on my feet and my hands were quick. That was the thing that everyone always told me when I was on the Rapier field. But I would go too quick, and it's called the Masters of Defense. Before it was even there, it's a defensive thing, but I was not defensive at all. I was just like, I'm just going to attack and overwhelm them with my mastery of everything, and then would get destroyed. Like At first, everyone was terrified. It's like, this guy's really going to hurt us because he's a heavy fighter, had no clue what he's doing. So that worked for a little bit. I never hurt anybody, but I would scare him and then tag him. But then once they figured that out, it was almost comical. They would just tear me apart. Like
the intimidation factor of being a dude.
When that went away, they just tore me to shreds. And the biggest thing is they would tell me, you need to slow down. And then, of course, during I think it was my second reign, Talon was my photographer, and that's kind of how we became friends. And I used to joke, it's like, I'm going to be your cadet when this is all over. And he's like, oh, I'm going to make you my cadet. And it was a joke. And then at May Crown, and we're like, I'm starting to feel kind of weird because I'm serious, but I don't know if you're serious. And he goes, well, I'm serious. So I actually got to become his cadet, and that had some implications that he was worried about. But I wanted to be a student because I didn't get to be a student to Torgal for very long before I got knighted. And then after being a knight for so long, I kind of felt ripped off. I'm like, yeah, I was happy at the time, but now that I'm older, I wish I would have got to be a student a little bit longer. So I wanted to be a student again because I really missed out on that feeling. So he took me on as a student, and it was wonderful. And then of course I was living with Andrew at the time, Master Andrew. And so we got to fight once or twice a week. I lived with him for about a year. So I was surrounded by just awesome people, and they taught me how to fight and defend and instead of just attack. And as soon as I did that, I got better.
How did you get into rapier? Is that something that you took up during your reigns?
I actually took that up during my second reign. Because the first reign was 100% about Tassia. This was something that I knew would happen eventually. I just always felt that, eventually I'll win a crown. So when I won crown, I wanted it to be super, super, super special for her. And her interest when she got in the SCA was archery. So our first reign was all about archery. So we did as much with the archers as we could, archery on the warfield, archery and shooting bales and Robin Hoods and all that kind of stuff. And then the second reign was more about rapier because I knew what was coming down the pike with another peerage, because there was already talk about that with some of the peers. And I kind of knew it was coming. And also the number one reason, because I was raised that rapier was no good. It didn't belong in the SCA. It was garbage, wire weenies, all these negatives. And so I just totally bought into that because, that's what everybody said. So I bought into that. And it was during the Champions tournament, Queen's Rapier Champion tournament during our first reign. Was the largest rapier tournament that Ontier had held. And that was because everybody knew that I absolutely despised rapier. And the rapier community, even though I didn't really know them, but they overwhelmed my queen and brought her to tears of joy, which really just devastated me. It crushed my heart. I mean, it was the most beautiful thing that I think I'd experienced at the time, that they wanted to be my queen's champion because they knew I despised them. And so they were going to show me what the rapier community was all about. And that was the day that I'm like, okay, I was wrong. I'm an ass. So.
Well, I mean, at least in our kingdom, I think that even before the Master of Defense was a peerage, there was sort of a, we treat the white scarves as like a peerage that isn't really a peerage. I mean, they've always been given sort of an amount of respect. Sure. And they are phenomenal with serving the queen. I mean, that what you experienced is what I've seen. from working on too many retinues to tell you.
Yeah.
But they are phenomenal. So
Yeah.
are you really enjoying your role in the Rapier community now?
Yeah, I actually do. And ever since that day, you know, because that's where I decided the second reign would be all about Rapier, but did a little bit here and there, and then full blown went into being a student, because it was, you know, everyone's like, well, is it just because it's another cookie? I'm like, no, I get to be a student. I missed out on being a student, and I already know how crappy I am at it. So this is going to take a lot of work. And I think, I want to say it took almost 8 years, you know, before they offered me my white scarf. And that was awesome because I didn't have to worry about anything. I just had to go and learn. It was just like being a squire again. I go to fight practices, fight the best of the best every time they're there. Practice at home. I actually did practice. I had some drills, foot drills, and pegging little things. You know, I never did pell work, but I did a lot of extra work with my rapier because I wanted to perfect it, because it's hard because you're going up against a dime-sized point coming at you, and everything counts.
Yeah.
I mean, the first shot I ever took in rapier, a guy looked at me, he looked down and actually rolled his eyes, rolled his head, and stabbed me in the big toe. And I went off. I was pissed because it hurt. And he's like, hey, it's a legal target. And I was like, okay, everything counts. So that aspect of it is cool. The live steel aspect of it is cool. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And it's fun now. And like you said, we always treated the white scarves kind of as a peerage. You know, they had a meeting. They would tell the crown, hey, this is what we think. And the crown would take their words and their advice. So it was actually pretty natural that they would be a peerage in our kingdom, even though that was kind of a headache when it actually happened. But I think we're kind of over that now, several years down the road.
Yeah, it was a little bit weird to, you know, have the white scarves not be, you know, yeah. Anyway, so tell me your favorite thing about reigning.
Oh, recognizing people for their deeds, absolutely phenomenal. Especially new folks that haven't been around, people getting their first awards and stuff like that. When you call them up and they kneel and you take their hands and you just feel them tremble, that's awesome. I mean, it's just cool because it is a game, and you know, when you've reached that point and you're reigning, and it's all fun, and you know, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, but recognizing people and seeing in their faces and feeling in their touch how much everything means to them. And it might just be a personal thing. I've even seen people that you would never expect get called up for something, and they're surprised and they cry. You know, it's always a joyful thing. I think being recognized for things that you do is important. I think it's a human nature thing, and being able to help provide that, or being the tool, because I consider the crown is basically a tool of the peerages, even though we get to make the ultimate decision. We get to actually recognize those people, and that to me was like the favorite thing.
I think sometimes people feel anonymous, and you know, the recognition makes them feel like, oh, you know, people do know me, and they do know what I'm doing, and they appreciate it, and that's
Sure.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, you're not the only person that has said, you know, the AOA is like the ultimate, because the people are so excited about
Sure.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to think it was just the AOA, but I've seen people get peerages and awards in between that were just like kind of catches them off guard. And I think just people just like to feel liked and loved by
Appreciated.
their peers. Yeah, I think, and it's funny how much I think we take that for granted, but you can see when they get that excited and emotional over something, that most people think is kind of trivial until it happens to them. I think it's a big human nature thing. It's pretty cool.
So how did you feel when you got your lion from Vic and Astrid?
That was pretty overwhelming. I thought, this nothing I'll ever do from this point will be bigger than that. I mean, to be considered, because the original reason for that was that award was created for people who still continue to provide service and all these things to the kingdom, the SCA, who have everything. And I still have some things to accomplish within the SCA before I have it all. But that was pretty overwhelming and super, super, super honored, because that's the top. I mean, you can't get any bigger than that. It was pretty fantastic.
So for people that don't know, the lion in Antir originally might have been for the person that has everything, but it sort of has morphed into the pillars of the kingdom, the people that represent what the kingdom is supposed to be, or that kind of thing. So it's a big deal. And Skeggi got it from one of our cool friends named Vic. So that was awesome. So do you have a favorite memory from being king?
Well, the one that I talked about with Tasia during the Rapier tournament, that's a big one. It's really hard to have a favorite, because during both our reigns, every moment was just gigantic. I mean, it was fantastic. And some of my favorite moments weren't like great things. They were things that happened that were like, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to do that, but I'm not even going to tell the incident. There was things that happened that, like, some people got hurt, but it was hilarious, and it happened during these throes of fun and joy. But someone got injured, and and the injury wasn't terrible, and the aftermath of the injury was kind of fun and hilarious. But there's so many moments I can't. But the one that sticks out that I'll never ever forget was definitely the Queen's Rapier tournament. That was my number one out of both reigns.
Do you have current goals in the SCA?
To go to an event. Yeah. My God. So currently I've been going for my laurel since 1990, maybe even 1989, but I think 1990. I've been chasing that. First of all, because I thought, well, I'm never gonna get knighted, so I'm gonna go ahead and try to become a laurel. So like even Ludviga's coronet, I can't remember if it was 92 or 94 when I built that thing. So I've been doing artwork and all these different things. So that's still something that I would like to accomplish. I'm currently a student to Master Torfin.
Cool.
Which was fun because he was my squire.
Great.
And so when Mishka was my original master. Of course, he died in a tragic motorcycle wreck, and so I was left to myself. And Torfin became a master because of his awesome skills. And him and I lived together back when he was my squire, and I showed him some etching stuff, and he was already doing some metallurgy. And then, of course, he took off. He's done all his castings and all that kind of stuff, and his research and all that. So I asked him one day if he would take me on as his student, and he accepted. And I said, well, I treated you good as a squire, right? He's like, right. So I'm still his student. I haven't got to do as much artwork as I'd like, because I've been moving back and forth from Owertha and Wayskeep, over the last 4 years now. But that's still something I'd like to accomplish. And then I've never set out to be a pelican. I've always told the pelicans in my councils that I will never be a pelican. You people are awesome, crazy amount of work. It wasn't something that I set up because I've run some events and I suck at it. And I've tried to do some things and I suck at it. But for some reason, oh, I got invited to Pelicans conference in the West by their majesties. They sent runners and like, yes, your majesties. And they're like, well, have a seat. I'm like, what's going on? Well, it's Pelicans Council. I'm like, well, I'm honored, but I'm not a Pelican. And that's happened a couple of times. And they're like, you may be. So a lot of people, in that, we noticed that when we were reining as well, is this, people just assume certain people have everything, right? This is like, well, geez, that person's a Duke, he's a Lion, he must be this, he must be that. It's like, no, just go check the OP, it's all there. So that's how people end up in certain categories without the AOA.
Right.
They have all these awards that they may not have the earlier ones because no one looks, or they just assume, oh, well, they must already have that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
okay,
so that's.
Before we go look at your sword, I promised Duke Aaron last night that we would talk about your hair and your various styles over the years. So I'm going to share screen again.
Got my mohawk. Yeah.
And we're going to talk. This is not the right one, but we'll start with this one.
Yeah. Me and my lover.
So you've got the cool long braids here.
Yeah. I don't know how anyone could see those braids beyond the picture of Rutger Hauer.
They stand out. They really do.
Yeah. So.
Oh, you want me to go back?
Yeah. So I was still a Squire at the time. I was actually wearing my Squire belt because I lost mine, and that's a whole big long story. So I built that belt and the Thor's hammer, so more of my arts. But when I lived in Seattle, I was in a bunch of different bands, and the gal that I was dating, Shar, loved to braid my hair, and she'd put I can't remember what they're called. Like, they're not ribbons, but they're hair braid things made out. I can't even remember what they're called, but so yeah. And then at the time, Dexter Holland, the lead singer. Now I just forgot the name of the band, but anyway, his hair was like that, so she did my hair like that. A lot of people thought I was a singer of that band because we had the same last name and the same hair.
All right, and then I think this is probably the same era. It's just not braided.
Yeah, that was just a little bit before. I don't know. That may have been after. I may have been a knight because I think I was knighted by then. The first shot was Squire, and this was a little bit later.
You have such a baby face here.
Yeah, and broken teeth and.
All right.
Yeah.
So this is really what they wanted me to talk to you about is your mohawk. And
1894. Yeah. So I've had every color mohawk in the rainbow. I've had chartreuse, blue, purple, green, you name it. I've had it. But I was playing in a band called Tourette Syndrome in Seattle, and I was playing bass and backup guitar, and so egg whites and Knox gelatin, and that thing will not fall down.
It's impressive.
That's the
after
flop.
Fighting.
Yeah, that's the flopped version of it.
Flopped version.
I don't know. I thought it looked kind of badass, but
it does.
A lot of people were like, "Oh, nice mohawk, man. Nice. That's period." And I'm like, "Yeah, if you do a little research, you'd find out how period it was."
You know, I tried to find the picture of you as champion with, I think, Skeggi as crown prince and Thorn as king when you had the mohawk, and I couldn't find it, but that's one of my favorite pictures.
Is it the one where it's close up of us, or where I was leading Thorin in to 3YC?
I think it's a close up. You guys are posing.
Yeah.
And then we have this one. This is the last one I have.
Yeah.
Just you with your short blondie hair.
Yeah. So that was the day I got knighted. And
oh, really?
Yeah. That's my knighting tunic that Duchess Onhrod made for me. And she's been my best friend since like 1989. She kind of took me under her wing, and so that's another funny story I'll have to tell you. But Yeah, I had cut my hair, bleached it out. So that was 1992.
Awesome. So I promised I would talk about your hair. So I did.
Yeah, and I've got a mohawk right now. I just haven't colored
really?
it. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
short.
it's
Oh, it's long.
Well, it's long on the top. I just haven't gelled it up, and
cool.
So I'll be 53 next month, and I'm like, oh, I need another mohawk, and I'll be that old guy that shows up at a punk concert.
You just got to live your authentic self, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, all right, let's look at your sword.
Oh, all right. I got to take a swig of beer first.
Okay, no problem.
So I would like to promote this stuff right here.
Oh, that looks yummy. Blueberry ale.
So up in Alaska, where we lived in Eagle River, they have Matanuska Brewery, which was right around the corner from our place, and they have blueberry ale. And most beer has a little hint of fruit. This tastes more like a blueberry cider, and it's purple, and it's phenomenal.
It's purple?
It's literally purple. Yeah, because I can't drink beer anymore, but I can drink this. Well, when I went up there a week ago, I found out that they can it now. So I brought back a whole bunch of 6-packs for me and Militia.
That sounds right up my alley. I love fruity beer. Okay, let's look at it. Is that a tie?
That
basket?
is
a Marcus?
That, Sir Marcus titanium basket hilt. That is my first. I had one other one, but it was too big, so my hand was getting hurt. But it's I've also got a titanium demi gauntlet that I use in it. 2-finger trigger. I used to use 1 finger, and for the last 28 years, I've used a 2-finger trigger. That's it. Slightly tapered inside. It's
I see that. Cool.
It's smaller up here and then wider down here, so it can't really slide forward too much. And then it's exactly legal. I'm not going to say what that number is. And then it's 2 inches by exactly legal.
I was going to say, usually you fight with a boat oar, but it is 2 inches wide. So
yeah, it doesn't flex front to back very much. That's why it's real simple for me to know when I hit flat or the position of my hand usually. And then I've got the low profile thrusting tip as well.
Cool. How long is it?
I wrote this down.
Oh, cool.
Forget. So it's 34 inches butt to tip, and the blade is 26 inches from here up, and it is exactly 2 pounds 8 ounces.
Excellent. Do you do anything special with the tape, or is it just spiral wrapped with some athletic tape over it?
So yeah, I spiral wrap it with strapping tape, which I have a sloppy job right there.
Yeah.
And then I just do long strips of hockey tape, and then I tape up the ends pretty good with strapping tape this way up into the foam. That way, when the foam gets pressed down, it doesn't blow out the sides. And then right in about the middle, sometimes slightly lower than the middle, I actually do a bunch of extra wraps, probably 10 extra wraps double high, because that's the sweet spot of my sword. That's where I hit most people. It's right there where all that tape is gone. And I left it this way when you said I was going to be showing off my sword. So I hit most people about 11 inches above my hand, which might be why it hits so hard. My whole philosophy was, this is heavy out here and this is heavy here, and everything in between those 2 points is going to get crushed. And
cool. I love those tie basket hilts. They're great.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. I've had this one. This is the first one he built me forever ago, and I hated basket hilts. I used to fight in a D guard, back in the day. I think he still fights with them.
Yeah, he does.
But my fingers were getting crushed all the time. You couldn't make a gauntlet right. You just couldn't make it where it was super functional, and you wouldn't get. And Marcus one day, he goes, "Hey, let me see your gauntlet. I want to check it out." And so I gave him my gauntlet, and he gave me that basket hilt and goes, "Good trade. I can't watch you get smashed in the fingers anymore." And I hated basket hilts. But this one is fabulous. Absolutely love it.
Super. All right. Well, let's do the final 10. If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
I would love, because I never got to fight Duke Paul. We had a Zen fight once that lasted 45 minutes when I was champion of the West. So that was as close as we ever came. But he's taught me a lot, and I think that would have been great. Him and I get to fight.
Cool. Who would you like to see reign in your kingdom?
Well, I definitely would have loved to see Torfin and Kolfina. Torfin can't fight because of some injuries.
That's so sad. I miss him on the field a lot.
Yeah, I miss them both. But I think their reign would be phenomenal. I really don't know, but I would love to see somebody new who nobody sees coming, because I think it's healthy for the kingdom to have new people reign. Yeah. But so I may come back to that, but I'm going to say Torfin and Kolfina. I'll just leave it at that.
Personally, I would love to see Attias win for Litwiga, because I wasn't around when she reigned before, and I love him. But it
was awesome. I would love to see him. I was listening when he was fighting in the finals, and I thought that was going to be his day, and I was super bummed because
he fought so well. Yeah. If you could talk stick with anyone in the world for an hour, who would it be?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know, because all the people that I want to talk to, I talk to on a regular basis.
You can pass. That's cool.
Yeah, all right. I'll pass. Can't think.
What is your favorite medieval-esque or period movie?
Blood of Heroes and Big Trouble in Little China.
I was gonna say it has to be. Okay. If you could add a rule to the rules of the list, what would it be?
The shoulder to shoulder, chin to crotch shields across the world. No, nothing bigger. No war shields in Crown. This is it's so boring. Oh my God, it's so boring.
I just wish that if we're going to have it culturally be a convention here, that we would just make it a rule so that it would be consistent.
Yeah.
But
that's just me. People need to learn is it's really scary when you have a small shield. Trust me, I know, but you actually do better because you can see everything.
Yeah. I think the fight's more fun. It's more fun to watch too.
Yeah. But we're about being heroes. That's
Okay, what is your favorite tournament format?
I love Ursimus. Round robin until the Sweet 16, and then Sweet 16 until the two finalists. Absolutely love that format. It's the best.
It is the best. What is your favorite event?
Used to be Alpine Pass War when it was still around. Still really love Go Force. Go Force is that I was going to quit the SEA after my first reign because I was so burned out, and Anrad made me go to Go Force, and it's been my favorite event ever since.
Cool. I can't wait to go. What is your favorite, or if you could have any helmet in the world, regardless of cost, what kind would it be?
Ugo.
Yeah. He makes some beautiful stuff. He and Vren together are like the dynamic duo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's Saturday morning at Estrella, and several people want to talk to you about last night. What did you do?
I drank and went to drumming parties with belly dancing.
Okay. Who's your favorite fight ever?
Ooh. I would. There's Duke Havork, Duke Sean, Duke Spin. Those three, I can't choose between them. It's just like those are the most phenomenal. They're either brutal or it's just exciting. It's like it's hard to choose between those three, but I've probably only had 2 or 3 bad fights in my career where I left upset, win, lose, or draw. But man, they're all fun.
Cool. And then the bonus question is, who is the cleanest fighter in your kingdom? And you can do either Ontario or the West, either one you want.
Sir Cyrus in Oertha. Super clean. Almost to a fault. I've seen a lot of fighters like that. And then Sir Thorkel in Ontario, just super clean.
He really is.
Yeah, and it's hard to choose because I mean I don't think about fighters being thick. I mean back in the day that was a thing. It's just like, oh, he's a rhino hide. It's like I can't even remember the last time I heard that term. Because I think no one wanted that stigma back then, but in this day and age, people are more likely to call you out in a group. So I think it's the way we train too. We used to just get beat up, and if someone didn't hit you hard enough, it's like, no, it's not hard enough. Where now it's like I think we train better. Where people seem to be more on par with each other, even kingdom to kingdom.
Yeah, I mean the point of the question isn't really to denigrate anybody. It's just sort of to raise up the people that inspire us and that we look up to as pinnacles of how to do it right. So, and right. Thorkel is I mean he's just so clean.
Yeah, and he's just a phenomenal human being, and that's why he got knighted. He fights good. He's honorable. He works his butt off, and
he and his wife worked so hard at like every event they go to.
Yeah, absolutely. Even Go Force.
Really?
Oh yeah, he can't remember if he won the tournament, but I mean he was helping people like, oh, this thing is happening, and he was like jumping all over stuff, helping out where it got recognized from other kingdoms, and it would send runners. It's like, we need to talk to the King of Ontario, and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, this man is phenomenal.
So I have to ask you one more question because I meant to ask it earlier, and it's something that I've always sort of wanted to ask. You and Skeggi were both squires of Torgal at the same time.
Right.
Is there any sort of sibling rivalry, like to get your duchy first, or to outdo each other, or because when I started, it was always Skeggi and Skeggi. Ooh.
Right. Yeah. Well, they called us the Scuzz brothers.
The Scuzz brothers.
Yeah, and it wasn't because we were hideous or ugly or stinky. It was because our first 2 letters are SK. So, and I think Skepti came up with that. So him and I never really had a rivalry earlier on. It was just like, because he was squire before me. He was squire much younger as well. And then I came on. So I was like, he was the senior squire, if you will. And we just brutalized everybody. It was like he would beat him up on one side, I'd beat him up on the other side. So there was never a rivalry, and he could kick my ass. I mean, there's no bones about it. He had one of the most devastating raps, and it always hit you in the base of the helmet, and you had a headache when you were done.
Right.
So there was no rivalry. My thing was just don't get hit by that. That's part of that defensive thing. Wasn't just the knights and dukes. It was Skepti as well. But after I got knighted, he definitely changed because he was the senior squire. He could kick my butt, and then I got knighted. And so after that, it wasn't a rivalry, but then he definitely worked a lot harder. And he did. He worked, and then he became king before I became king. But so there may have been a thing in his mind where he's like, I'm going to do this, where I'm just like, I'm a seat of my pants kind of guy. I'm just like, I'm just going to do stuff. And if someone says, hey, you're worthy of this, hey, that's cool. But I never had those kind of goals and aspirations. I work hard because they're fun, and I love doing it.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me. I really appreciate your time. It's been a blast. And the story of your vigil is hilarious. I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Stories. You would have to do this series for a year to hear all my stories. There's so many.
I have to have like the Skeggi show.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to be talking to Duke Jax from the Outlands on Saturday. So that should be super cool. And then Sunday, I'll be talking to Duke Kjartan from Ontier, which will be super cool too. Kjartan and I sort of came up together, and he's obviously totally surpassed me, but it'll be fun. So thanks again, Skeg. And thanks everyone for joining us. Bye-bye.
Right. Take care.